And when I got involved in my gambling, even though I wasn't hiding it, the casino is a very public thing, but when I talked about that, that seemed to be something that people couldn't relate to as far as being a part of my life or shortcoming in my life.
Gladys Knight, the woman the world reveres as the Empress of Soul, is not just a voice, but a living symbol of an entire generation. From her early days singing with the Pips in a small Atlanta church, her voice has carried across more than half a century, touching the hearts of millions around the globe. Timeless hits like Midnight Train to Georgia and Neither One of Us are more than just songs. They are stories steeped in emotion, filled with sorrow, faith, and the strength to overcome adversity. Yet behind the dazzling stage lights, Gladys Knight's life has been marked by deep cracks. Broken marriages, legal battles, the devastating loss of a son, and even a descent into gambling that once nearly swallowed her whole, all became chapters in her struggle. Through it all, she never lost her faith in music, nor in God. Now, in her 80s, reflecting on both triumph and tragedy, Gladys Knight stands as a tragic yet triumphant figure in American music, a woman who sings with a heart once shattered, and it is precisely that brokenness that has made her voice eternal. Early life. Gladys Maria Knight was born on May 28, 1944, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a poor but close-knit working-class family. Her father, Merrill Knight Sr., worked at the post office, a steady yet modest job, while her mother, Sarah Elizabeth, devoted herself to raising their 6 children. Their small home stood in a black community that still endured deep social injustices at the time. Yet instead of letting hardship and outside pressures break them, the Knight family chose to nurture their children with faith, love, and music. It was within this environment that the seeds of Gladys's talent were sown. From a very young age, Gladys was encouraged by her mother to sing in the local Baptist church choir. Her voice stood out, warm yet powerful, capable of silencing an entire congregation. Gospel music in the church was more than joy. It became a spiritual foundation, teaching the young girl that a song could heal pain and bring people together. At the age of 8, Gladys made an unexpected breakthrough when she competed in and won the popular television program Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour. The show was known for launching young American talent, and her victory drew the attention of the entire city of Atlanta. But for Gladys, that win also marked a turning point. Her childhood was quickly replaced by grown-up responsibilities. While her peers were still carefree, she was already facing bright stage lights, TV cameras, and demanding rehearsals. By age 10, Gladys, her brother Bubba, and 2 cousins had formed the group The Pips. At first, they performed at family gatherings, community events, and churches, but soon expanded to small stages across Atlanta. From then on, Gladys lived a double life, a student by day, a performer by night, and a traveling singer on weekends. She would later admit she never truly had a normal childhood. Her playtime was stolen by long schedules and constant trips. The Knight family was far from wealthy. They struggled financially, while the Pips' early career brought little stable income. Gladys learned how to save, share responsibilities with her siblings, and endure the disappointments of being overlooked in those early years. Yet those harsh times became a steel forge that shaped her character and talent. She developed strict discipline, learned to handle pressure, and, most importantly, found unshakable faith that music could offer a way out of poverty and lift her family above hardship. From a little black girl in a segregated community, Gladys Knight entered her teenage years carrying something rare, a voice overflowing with emotion and a will of steel, qualities that would one day earn her the title Empress of Soul. Early career. Gladys Knight's musical journey began with a simple, almost accidental moment. On her brother Bubba's 10th birthday, the family's record player broke down. To save the party, Gladys, Bubba, her sister Brenda, and cousins Eleanor and William Guest stepped up and sang together on the spot. That impromptu performance convinced the family they could become a real group. With their mother's support, they formed a band and took the name The Pips, inspired by their cousin James Pip Woods. Their first stages weren't grand theaters, but churches, fairs, and community parties around Atlanta, where Gladys's powerful voice blended with the tight harmonies of her siblings and cousins, slowly shaping a unique style. They weren't just singing for fun. They competed in local talent shows, winning often enough that the Pips became a small phenomenon in the city. In 1957, when Gladys was only 13, the group signed their first contract with Brunswick Records and recorded Whistle My Love. It was a professional milestone, but failed to bring the success they had hoped for. The group still had to tour as openers for stars like Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke, using those chances to gain stage experience. Internal changes also struck. Brenda and Eleanor left to start families, forcing the Pips to rebuild. Edward Patton and Langston George joined, solidifying the lineup with stronger harmonies and discipline, while placing Gladys's voice firmly at the center. The real turning point came in 1961 when they recorded Every Beat of My Heart, written by Johnny Otis. Without major label backing, a small Atlanta company released the song first, quickly landing it on radio. Realizing they weren't receiving fair credit or royalties, the Pips re-recorded it for Fury Records. In a rare twist, both versions charted simultaneously. The original release by the small label climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, putting Gladys Knight and the Pips on the national map. Around this time, the group officially changed its name, publicly acknowledging Gladys as the soul of the act. Their follow-up, Letter Full of Tears, also broke into the top 40, establishing their blend of soul and gospel, distinguished by disciplined harmonies and polished stage presence. But early success came with challenges. In 1962, Langston George left the group, and that same year, Gladys temporarily stepped away to give birth to her first child. While the remaining members kept the group alive, the absence of her lead vocals left a noticeable gap. In 1964, Gladys returned with a newfound maturity and emotional depth, her voice richer, infused with personal experience, signaling a new chapter of growth. During this period, the group signed with Max Records and worked with producer Van McCoy. They released songs like Giving Up and Lovers Always Forgive. Though none matched the success of Every Beat of My Heart, these years allowed Gladys Knight and the Pips to refine their sound, sharpen their stagecraft, and maintain their foothold in the soul scene of the 1960s. These were not years of great glory, but of hard training. Small studios, long tours, and constant persistence built their foundation. By 1966, after nearly a decade of struggle, Gladys Knight and the Pips signed with Motown Records. Compared to Motown's big stars like the Supremes or Marvin Gaye, they were not given top priority. Yet everything they had endured, winning small Atlanta talent shows, the false start with Brunswick, the breakthrough of Every Beat of My Heart, and Gladys's strong comeback after motherhood, had forged their resilience and unique style. That persistence carried them to the doorstep of a new era where true stardom awaited. Career success. In 1966, after nearly a decade of grinding through small studios and little-known record labels, Gladys Knight and the Pips officially signed with Motown Records. the empire of black music at the time. But joining Motown did not mean instant stardom. To the label's executives, they were a second-tier act, overshadowed by Diana Ross and the Supremes or Berry Gordy's Golden Geese, the Temptations. The media largely ignored them, and Motown's promotional campaigns offered only leftovers once the crown jewels had been prioritized. The most humiliating moment came when the group was assigned as the opening act for Diana Ross and the Supremes on national tours. For many artists, this might have been a golden opportunity. For Gladys Knight and the Pips, however, it quickly turned into a paradox. Gladys's warm, powerful voice, combined with the group's sharp harmonies and choreography, drew such explosive reactions that the headlining performance often felt anticlimactic afterward. From being underestimated, they suddenly became a threat to Motown's star act. The bitter consequence, they were removed from the tour. It seemed like a setback, but in truth it revealed something undeniable. Their talent could not be suppressed. Just a year later, driven by resilience and a hunger to prove themselves, Gladys Knight and the Pips released I Heard It Through the Grapevine. The song had been recorded by other Motown artists, but their version carried a raw, unique energy. Gladys's vocals packed both strength and anguish, layered over urgent rhythms and tight harmonies, turning the track into an explosive yet haunting experience. Released at the end of 1967, it not only reached the Billboard Top 10, but sold over 1 million copies, a feat that stunned Motown itself. 2 years later, Marvin Gaye's version would become definitive, but the Pips recording carved out its own legacy, establishing them as challengers inside the very house that had once dismissed them. From that breakthrough, they continued building momentum with R&B hits like The End of Our Road and If I Were Your Woman. Their years at Motown were bittersweet, marked by both triumph and neglect. But the discrimination and constant struggle hardened them into a group ready to explode once the right opportunity arrived. That opportunity would come when they left Motown for a new home where the brightest spotlight awaited. In 1973, tired of playing second fiddle, they left Motown and signed with Buddha Records. This decision proved fateful, catapulting them from underappreciated underdogs to the very center of soul music. Immediately after joining Buddha, they released Midnight Train to Georgia, a heartfelt ballad about a woman abandoning the bright lights to return home with the man she loves. Gladys's aching delivery, supported by the Pips' seamless harmonies, turned the song into a cultural phenomenon. Midnight Train to Georgia hit #1 on both the pop and R&B charts and won them a Grammy, solidifying it as Gladys Knight's signature song for life. That success opened the floodgates. Soon came Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, a warm, affirming love ballad, and I've Got to Use My Imagination with the funky pulse of the 1970s. Both became major hits, proving they weren't one-hit wonders but true musical storytellers, able to touch audiences across a spectrum of emotions. Each track felt like a chapter in their autobiography, marked by pain, hope, and spiritual strength. Their artistry extended beyond the charts. In 1974, Gladys Knight and the Pips collaborated with Curtis Mayfield on the soundtrack for Claudine. The project was special, not only musically but socially, depicting the struggles of working-class black families in America. With Mayfield's compositions and Gladys's emotive voice, the album gave voice to millions of women balancing family and hardship. Both political and deeply personal, Claudine became another cultural milestone. These triumphs pushed the group on to the international stage, Tours in Europe, especially in London, Paris, and Amsterdam, were met with rapturous acclaim. To audiences abroad, Gladys Knight and the Pips were no longer just entertainers. They embodied love, resilience, and Black pride. From a small family group in Atlanta, they had risen to global icons, leaving a permanent mark on the history of soul music. As the 1980s dawned, the U.S. music market shifted toward disco, funk, and, later, electronic pop. Many traditional soul groups faltered, but Gladys Knight and the Pips showed a rare ability to adapt. They signed with Columbia Records, a major label willing to invest in a group with more than 2 decades of experience. This marked a new chapter, holding on to their soul roots while embracing modern sounds. Early in the decade, they released Landlord, a funk pop track that climbed the R&B charts, proving they could still command an audience even as soul was fading from the mainstream. But the real highlight came in 1983 with Save the Overtime for Me. Driven by dance beats, synthesizers, and contemporary funk grooves, it shot to #1 on the R&B chart, one of the few times they topped it in the MTV and dance era, while many of their peers had already been forgotten. The accompanying album, Visions, 1983, blended Gladys's soulful depth with the glossy sound of the 80s. It earned positive reviews and demonstrated that the group wasn't living off past glory. They could evolve and thrive in a changing industry. Tracks like You're #1 in My Book and Till I See You Again showed a Gladys who was both familiar and refreshed, her voice timeless against shifting backdrops. Their final artistic peak came in 1987 with the album All Our Love. Its standout single, Love Overboard, soared to #1 on the R&B chart and won another Grammy, confirming their enduring appeal. Yet this triumph was bittersweet. Everyone sensed these would be the last great moments of a legendary career. All Our Love became their final studio album together, a fitting farewell to fans who had followed them for 3 decades. In 1988, they closed their historic journey with a farewell tour. On stage, Gladys's powerful vocals and the Pips' signature dance moves moved audiences to tears as they realized they were witnessing the last time a legendary collective would shine together. When the lights dimmed, it was not just the end of a group. It was the close of an era of soul, forever defined by the commanding voice of Gladys Knight and the steady, elegant harmonies of the Pips, who had lifted her from the very beginning. In 1989, Gladys Knight entered a special chapter of her career when she was chosen to perform the theme song for the James Bond film License to Kill. This was no small honor, as only artists with truly distinctive voices and global appeal were ever entrusted with such an iconic franchise. The song carried a dramatic, cinematic quality, capturing the danger and romance that defined Bond, and Gladys's rich, commanding vocals elevated it into a powerful statement. With License to Kill, she became one of the few Black female singers to leave her mark on the history of Bond themes, expanding her reach to audiences in Europe and Asia and introducing her artistry to a new generation. In the early 1990s, Knight proved she was far from resting on past glories. In 1991, she released the album Good Woman, which quickly climbed to #1 on the R&B charts. It was evidence that Gladys remained a leading voice in soul, even as pop and hip-hop were beginning to dominate. The record delivered beloved songs that balanced tradition with contemporary energy. 3 years later, in 1994, she released Just for You. an album praised for its artistic quality that went on to earn a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Album. These achievements underscored her resilience and ability to reinvent herself in an ever-changing musical landscape. Her career was not confined to studios and charts. Time and again, she was called upon to represent the American spirit by singing the national anthem at major sporting events. In 1991, she performed at the World Series, moving millions with her soulful interpretation. Nearly 3 decades later, in 2019, at the age of 74, Gladys once again stood before a global audience to sing at Super Bowl 53. This time, the performance carried additional weight. The NFL was embroiled in controversy due to Colin Kaepernick's protests, and her decision to accept drew mixed reactions. But Gladys stood firm, declaring that her choice came from faith and pride, insisting that the national anthem should not be politicized, but seen as a symbol of unity rather than division. Beyond her solo career, Gladys also made a mark through humanitarian work. In 1985, she joined Dionne Warwick, Elton John, and Stevie Wonder to record "That's What Friends Are For." The song not only topped the Billboard Hot 100, but became one of the decade's most famous charity anthems, raising millions of dollars in the fight against AIDS. It went on to win the Grammy for Song of the Year, and Gladys's contribution secured her place in one of music's most powerful philanthropic movements, where art became a tool of healing and compassion. Now, in her 80s, Gladys Knight shows no signs of slowing down. She continues to perform around the world, her voice, seasoned with life's triumphs and struggles, remaining both warm and majestic. Her concerts today are not just musical events, but bridges between a living legend and generations of listeners. In 2022, her career reached a crowning moment when she received the Kennedy Center Honors, one of the United States' most prestigious artistic awards. The recognition celebrated not only her vocal brilliance, but also her endurance. A life lived through hardship, perseverance, and reinvention, culminating in her place as a living legacy of soul music. Personal life. On stage, Gladys Knight shone brightly as the Empress of Soul. But behind the dazzling lights, her private life was marked by trials and loss. It all began with her first marriage to James "Jimmy" Newman in her late teenage years. At just 16, while still in the early days of her career, performing with the Pips on small stages around Atlanta, Gladys met Jimmy. He appeared to her as a source of security, a grown man who made the young girl feel protected. They quickly fell into the whirlwind of a youthful romance, and despite her family's objections, Gladys chose to tie her life to Jimmy's. Their wedding was modest, far from a grand event, but it signaled a turning point. From a teenage singer, Gladys became a wife, and soon after, a mother. The marriage began with promises of happiness, and before long, 2 children arrived: Kenya Newman, her first daughter, followed by her beloved son, James Newman III. For a young woman barely in her 20s, motherhood brought an abrupt maturity. By day, she rehearsed, recorded, and performed with the group. By night, she returned home to the cries of her infants. Yet the seemingly warm family portrait quickly cracked. Jimmy Newman had been addicted to drugs even before their marriage, and the problem only worsened. Instead of being a pillar of support, he was frequently absent, leaving Gladys to juggle her rising career with the demands of 2 small children. Many nights she returned home from the studio exhausted, only to find an empty house filled with the sound of her children's cries, nights when her tears fell silently in the dark. The faith she had placed in Jimmy eroded as his promises dissolved into nothing. The conflicts deepened. Gladys longed for a stable family, but Jimmy drifted further away, lost in addiction. The loneliness of marriage drained her, though she held on for the sake of her children. Time and again, she tried to persuade her husband to seek treatment, hoping to save their home, but every effort failed. The shadow of drugs was too strong, and young love alone could not bring him back. Eventually, unable to endure his absence both physically and emotionally, Gladys chose to leave. The marriage ended, leaving her with a deep wound. A single mother in her early 20s, carrying the weight of a demanding career while raising 2 children on her own. She would later describe this period as losing her entire youth, for instead of enjoying carefree years, she was forced to shoulder the roles of both father and mother. Her relationship with Jimmy Newman left lasting bitterness, but also a hard-earned lesson. It taught her that success on stage could never cover up the emptiness at home, and the scars of that first marriage would haunt her for decades. The death of her son, James Newman III, many years later only deepened that unhealed pain, sharpening the memory of her first love into something even more sorrowful. From her first romance with Jimmy Newman, Gladys emerged a woman shaped by suffering, an artist who poured her soul into music, and a mother carrying an unhealable scar. That experience forged the emotional depth in her voice, warm yet tinged with sorrow, so that every song Gladys sang felt like a true story of life told through music. After the heartbreak of her first marriage to Jimmy Newman, Gladys Knight still longed for a complete and secure home. She met Barry Hankerson in the early 1970s when her career with the Pips was soaring and Barry was establishing himself as an ambitious manager and producer. He was quick, intelligent, eloquent, and above all, understood the unforgiving rhythm of the entertainment industry, something Gladys had always hoped for in a life partner. Their relationship moved quickly. Barry's experience and strong energy convinced Gladys that he was the man who could heal her old wounds and share both the glory and the shadows of life off stage. In 1974, they married. Their joy deepened with the birth of their son, Shanga Hankerson, shortly afterward. For the first time since entering marriage, Gladys felt she had a normal family to return to after the spotlight dimmed. In the early years, their life together was relatively peaceful. Barry often accompanied Gladys to events and even managed part of her business affairs. But as time passed, the distance between them grew. Barry was tough, at times domineering, and liked to maintain control, while Gladys, scarred by past losses, increasingly craved independence. Professional disagreements spilled into their home life. Arguments ranged from business management to parenting to Barry's obsession with his own business ambitions, all of which eroded their bond day by day. The breaking point came in 1979 when tragedy struck their young son, Shanga. During a trip, he was suddenly kidnapped, an ordeal no mother could imagine. For Gladys, who had already experienced abandonment from her first husband, the shock felt like her entire world collapsing. In the days following the abduction, she barely slept, consumed with fear and despair, clinging only to the hope of a miracle that would bring her son back safely. Gladys did everything in her power. She spent over $1 million, a staggering sum at the time, on the search. She hired private investigators, consulted lawyers, and reached out to friends in the entertainment industry, leaving no lead unexplored. The media covered the story intensely. Fans across the country prayed, and Gladys endured endless days that felt like years. She continued performing, still under the stage lights, but behind every round of applause was a broken heart that only wanted to hold her child again. Fortunately, Shanga was eventually returned safely. Yet for Gladys, his return did not erase the trauma. It only deepened the scar. She later admitted that from the moment he went missing, she could never look at the world the same way again. Fear and unease became permanent companions, robbing her heart of peace. The marriage soon unraveled. Her divorce from Barry Hankerson was not just the end of love, but another crushing blow in a personal life already marked by pain. What she had hoped would be a safe harbor became another storm, leaving her once again a single mother, this time under the scrutiny of fame and public judgment. The wounds did not stop there. As an adult, Shanga Hankerson brought Gladys more heartbreak. He founded Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles, originally a tribute to his mother, but later became embroiled in a tax fraud scandal. In 2016, Shanga was arrested and sentenced, forcing Gladys to withdraw her name from the brand to protect her reputation. For a mother who had once sacrificed everything for her son, the scandal felt like another knife twisting into an old wound. Her marriage to Barry Hankerson thus left both joy and sorrow, a beloved son she cherished deeply, and bitter memories of ambition, conflict, and family tragedy. What began with love and hope spiraled into discord and ended in shattering loss. For Gladys, it served as a harsh reminder. The stage lights may blaze brightly, but behind the curtain, her heart still bore the weight of pain no one else could truly see. After the bitter turmoil with Barry Hankerson, Gladys Knight still did not give up hope that love could offer her a safe haven. In the early 1990s, she met Les Brown, a well-known motivational speaker in the United States. At the time, Les was a familiar face on television, delivering high-energy speeches about resilience, determination, and self-belief. For a woman who had endured so much loss, his presence felt like a new source of light, a man who could lift her spirit with words of positivity. Their romance blossomed quickly, born from a shared optimism and desire to rise above hardship. Gladys once admitted that Les made her feel stronger, while Les could not hide his pride at walking beside the Empress of Soul. In 1995, the two decided to marry, raising hopes that she might finally find stability after years of storms. But reality once again fell short of the dream. Their differences in lifestyle and work rhythm soon became clear. Gladys was used to touring and long hours in the recording studio, while Les was consumed by his speaking engagements and demanding schedule. Instead of being each other's source of encouragement, they gradually became added pressure. Their marriage drifted into a pattern of separate lives, rarely seeing one another, and when they did, small conflicts easily escalated. Gladys longed for a closer family bond, while Les kept his focus on his motivational career. The distance grew, love cooled, and after less than 2 years, they separated. This short-lived marriage ended without the deep scars of her earlier unions, but it also failed to provide the stability she so desperately sought. Her relationship with Les Brown was like a pause in the turbulent score of Gladys Knight's life. It gave her the chance to believe in love again, but also reminded her that spiritual connection alone was never enough to sustain a home. Looking back, Gladys has acknowledged that the marriage gave her a brief season of optimism and renewed faith. Yet ultimately, it remained just a fleeting chapter in her long journey to find happiness. After 3 turbulent marriages, it seemed Gladys Knight would live the rest of her life with only music and her children, until fate brought her to William McDowell, the man who would become her current husband. They met in the late 1990s when Gladys was already in her 50s, a stage in life where she had regained balance after years of suffering while also affirming her place as a soul legend. William McDowell was not from the entertainment industry, and that difference became his greatest strength. He offered Gladys the ordinary, steady rhythm of life she had long yearned for, but never truly known. Their love did not erupt with youthful fireworks. It blossomed quietly, deeply, and with profound understanding. With William, Gladys felt truly heard and cared for, not as the Empress of Soul, but as the woman behind the title. After decades of shouldering every burden, she finally found a man willing to stand beside her and share the weight. Yet even in William's arms, life brought its harshest blow. In 1999, Gladys faced the greatest loss of all. Her eldest son, Jimmy Newman III, died suddenly at the age of 36 from heart failure. The shock tore through her like nothing before. For a mother who had endured so much, she had never imagined burying her child so young. She later admitted it was the deepest wound of her life, a quiet agony she would carry forever, and the reason her voice, from then on, bore an even heavier sorrow. Through it all, William remained by her side. In 2001, they married. The ceremony was warm and modest, far from the glittering image of a superstar's wedding, because by then, Gladys was no longer searching for display or grandeur. What she wanted was peace and a steady shoulder to lean on. Together, she and William built a home in North Carolina, far from Broadway and Hollywood. They nurtured a large family of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, creating a circle of love Gladys had always missed in her younger years. William became more than a husband. He was her confidant, grounding her in community and simplicity. The two devoted themselves to social and charitable work, raising funds, supporting education and the arts, and tending to a large property in North Carolina, transforming it into a place where family and community came together. In those years, Gladys shed the image of a woman forever battling storms, embracing instead the gentler role of grandmother and great-grandmother, savoring the joy of simple days. Her relationship with William McDowell was life's reward after decades of trials. If Jimmy Newman had brought a painful youth, Barry Hankerson had left deep scars, and Les Brown had been only a brief pause, then William was truly her safe harbor. Now in her 80s, Gladys Knight can step onto a stage and sing with her soulful warmth, then return to the calm embrace of a man untouched by fame, who loves her simply for who she is. And perhaps that is the long-awaited Song of Happiness, the most complete and tender verse in the tumultuous life of the Empress of Soul. In the years when she seemed to have regained balance beyond the spotlight, Gladys Knight was forced to confront the most silent and relentless enemy of her life: gambling. At first, it was nothing more than a pastime during tours, a few games to kill time. But gradually, what began as harmless fun turned into obsession. On long nights in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, or Monte Carlo, she would sit for hours at the baccarat table, convinced that just one more win could recover all her losses. The reality was the opposite. On some nights, Gladys lost as much as $660,000 in just a few short hours. Her addiction stretched on for more than a decade, draining not only her finances, but also her spirit. Each time she left the casino, her purse empty and her mind heavy, Gladys felt she had not only lost money, but lost herself. She came to realize that the cards were not simply a game. They were her unconscious way of filling the void left by broken marriages, family losses, and the loneliness of a star surrounded by glitter, but rarely by true companionship. The danger of gambling lay in its invisible wounds, a psychological spiral where the more she lost, the more she tried to win back, and the deeper she sank. Time and again, Gladys promised herself she would stop, only to return to the table as if pulled by a darkness she could no longer control. She later admitted that during those years, she had nearly lost herself, her faith, her confidence, and her self-respect. Yet, on the brink of despair, Gladys found a path to light. She turned to Gamblers Anonymous, where people broken by the casino came together to share their mistakes and slowly rebuild. For Gladys, it was more than a support group. It was a lifeline. Each meeting, each story, taught her that the addiction could be defeated through discipline, faith, and love. In this journey, the role of William McDowell, her future husband, was vital. He did not judge or abandon her, but walked patiently by her side, reminding her to return to music, to family, to faith. Through a combination of her Mormon beliefs, the structure of Gamblers Anonymous, and the unwavering support of her partner, Gladys Knight broke free from temptation. And when she stepped onto the stage again, her voice rang out like testimony itself. Even from the deepest darkness, one can still find the light. These wounds and losses, instead of destroying her, carved new depth into the voice of the Empress of Soul. She sang as if every lyric were a confession, every melody an old scar soothed by the healing power of music, faith, and community. The years of turmoil brought on by loss and addiction pushed Gladys Knight to seek a foundation beyond the spotlight. When she no longer wanted to escape through gambling, she returned to the source of strength that had nurtured her childhood, faith. But that journey was not straightforward. It unfolded in stages, reflecting the shifts of her life. Gladys was first raised in the Baptist tradition, where the church choir not only trained her voice, but also taught her that music could touch the soul. After enduring many marital struggles, she converted to Catholicism in 1997, seeking peace in its solemn rituals. Yet another door soon opened. When her children embraced the LDS Church, Mormonism, Gladys followed them, determined to keep her family united. Within the LDS Church, Gladys was far more than an ordinary member. She met personally with President Gordon B. Hinckley, the church's leader at the time, and that connection inspired her to merge her faith with her music. This led to the creation of the Saints Unified Voices Choir, a project where she served as both founder and spiritual leader. Their debut album won a Grammy, proof that her legendary soul voice could blend seamlessly with gospel and prayer. The pinnacle of this journey came in 2018, when Gladys and the choir performed at the 40th anniversary celebration of the Revelation on the Priesthood, a landmark event in LDS history, symbolizing the harmony of faith, community, and cultural legacy she represented. If the stage gave Gladys fame, faith gave her purpose. This was clear in her everyday choices. Together with her husband, William McDowell, she left the big cities and settled in Fairview, North Carolina. There, the couple purchased an old school building and transformed it into a community center, a place where children and young people could learn, sing, and experience the value of sharing. It was more than a physical space. It was a symbol of Gladys's desire to turn her own losses into opportunities for others. That spirit radiated through her philanthropy. In 2017, she helped raise over $400,000 for the Children's Learning Centers of Fairfield County, supporting underprivileged children. For Gladys, faith was not confined to hymns or church services. It had to live in every action, from a benefit concert to the building of a community home. Legacy and influence. Gladys Knight not only left behind a string of timeless hits, but also carved her name into American cultural history as one of the greatest soul voices of the 20th century. Together with the Pips, she won 7 Grammy Awards, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996, and received the Kennedy Center Honors in 2022, recognition of an influence that spans generations. Songs like Midnight Train to Georgia, Neither One of Us, and her James Bond theme License to Kill have become part of the collective memory, forever tied to milestones in listeners' lives. Her impact extended far beyond music. In the 1960s and 1970s, she paved the way for many Black female artists to step into the spotlight, proving that talent and emotional truth could rise above barriers of gender and race. In every song, Gladys delivered a voice both tender and resilient, echoing the pain and strength of the African American community during times of profound social change. Her influence also lies in the way she connected music with faith and community. Through the Saints Unified Voices Choir, Gladys turned song into prayer, bringing gospel music closer to mainstream audiences. In doing so, she expanded the boundaries of soul, transforming it from a musical style into a spiritual language. Even her turbulent personal life became part of her legacy. From broken marriages and irreplaceable losses to her battle with gambling, she turned every hardship into raw material that breathed life into her voice. That authenticity made audiences believe every lyric she sang, not as a performance, but as truth from a wounded heart. Today, generations of singers, from Mariah Carey and Mary J. Blige to Alicia Keys, acknowledge Gladys Knight's influence. She stands as a bridge between Motown, classic soul, and modern R&B, proving that a voice rooted in honesty can endure beyond time. Present life. Gladys Knight, the woman the world reveres as the Empress of Soul, is not just a voice, but a living symbol of an entire generation. From her early days singing with the Pips in a small Atlanta church, her voice has carried across more than half a century, touching the hearts of millions around the globe. Timeless hits like Midnight Train to Georgia and Neither One of Us are more than just songs. They are stories steeped in emotion, filled with sorrow, faith, and the strength to overcome adversity. Yet behind the dazzling stage lights, Gladys Knight's life has been marked by deep cracks. Broken marriages, legal battles, the devastating loss of a son, and even a descent into gambling that once nearly swallowed her whole. All became chapters in her struggle. Through it all, she never lost her faith in music, nor in God. Now, in her 80s, reflecting on both triumph and tragedy, Gladys Knight stands as a tragic yet triumphant figure in American music, a woman who sings with a heart once shattered, and it is precisely that brokenness that has made her voice eternal. Yet the spotlight could not fully hide the turmoil at home. Her son, Shanga Hankerson, suddenly accused her husband, William McDowell, of emotional and financial abuse. Amid the media storm, Gladys publicly reassured everyone that she was healthy, happy, and continuing her scheduled performances. Despite the turbulence, she kept her promise to her fans, carrying her powerful voice through about 15 major cities, from Atlanta and Detroit to Washington, D.C. and Atlantic City, through the end of 2025. The message remained unchanged. Gladys Knight has never stopped moving forward. These 2 short but turbulent years have painted the portrait of a legend, celebrated at the highest peaks while weathering personal upheaval, yet still stepping firmly onto the stage, singing with her whole heart, just as she always has throughout her life. There are voices that do not need to scream to be remembered, because the very tone, saturated with sorrow and pride, etches itself into the listener's memory. Gladys Knight is one of them. She never needed gimmicks or dazzling lights to prove herself. It was enough to stand quietly on stage, letting her voice linger like the confession of a heart once broken. And perhaps it is precisely the cracks in her life that made her voice immortal. In an industry often defined by noise and spectacle, the more truthful an artist is, the more scars they carry, the more we yearn to listen. The ultimate answer is something only Gladys Knight herself will ever hold, while the audience is left with the echo of a life that was never whole. And what about you? When you think of Gladys Knight, what comes to mind first? The Empress of Soul shining brightly under the spotlight, or the resilient woman who endured countless trials, yet still sang as if she had never been broken? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe so we can continue this journey together, uncovering the tragic yet inspiring stories of music's greatest legends.